The needle hit 0 on my bank account display, and I stared at that cold digital screen like it was announcing my death sentence. 3 months. That's all I had left before everything would crumble. My name is Jake Morrison, 34 years old, and until last Tuesday, I thought I had my life figured out. I was wrong. Dead wrong. For 8 years, I'd been the night security guard at Premier Auto Rentals in downtown Chicago. 8 years of walking those empty lots under flickering streetlights, checking locks, watching for thieves who never came. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and kept food on Sarah's table. My wife, Sarah, 5 years married, and she still looked at me like I hung the moon, even when I came home smelling like coffee and disappointment. The company went belly up on a Tuesday morning. Mr. Henderson called us all into that cramped break room that smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams, cleared his throat, and delivered the news like he was reading a grocery list. Effective immediately, Premier Auto Rentals is ceasing operations. Just like that. 23 employees gone. Decades of combined service. Irrelevant. I remember the sound Sarah made when I told her. This small, wounded noise, like air being let out of a balloon. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that moment when everything started to unravel, because what happened next would test every fiber of my being and ultimately lead me to a truth I never saw coming. The morning after I lost my job, I sat at our kitchen table, the one Sarah picked out at a garage sale 3 years ago, painted sunshine yellow because she said it would make our mornings brighter. She was scrambling eggs, humming that tune she always hummed when she was worried. I spread the classified ads across that yellow table like battle plans, circling anything that looked remotely possible. "Look at this one, honey," I said, trying to inject optimism into my voice. "Morrison Logistics is looking for delivery drivers. Says here they're hiring immediately." Sarah peered over my shoulder, her auburn hair tickling my cheek. She smelled like vanilla and hope. "That sounds promising, Jake. What do they need?" I read the fine print, and my heart sank. "Reliable vehicle required. Must be able to lift 50 pounds. Clean driving record." I had the clean record, could lift way more than 50 pounds, but the vehicle requirement stopped me cold. Our old Honda had given up the ghost 2 months prior, and we'd been making do with the city bus system ever since. For 3 weeks, I pounded the pavement. I walked into every business in a 5-mile radius, shook hands until my palm was raw, smiled until my face hurt. Nothing. The economy was tight, they said. They'd call if anything opened up, they said. But my savings account kept shrinking, and the bills kept coming. Then I saw it. The golden opportunity that would either save us or destroy us completely. The job posting appeared on my laptop screen like a beacon of hope. Independent contractor opportunity. Earn 5,000 plus monthly. Vehicle provided. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read the details. A logistics company needed drivers for high-end deliveries. They provided the vehicle, insurance, everything. All I needed was a $8,000 security deposit, refundable after 6 months of successful service. I stared at that screen until the words burned into my retinas. $8,000. I had exactly $7,200 in savings, our entire safety net, 3 months of bare-bones living expenses. But if this job was real, if it paid what they promised, I could pay back the deposit and have enough left over to rebuild our emergency fund within 2 months. Sarah found me at 2 a.m., still staring at the laptop screen, calculator in hand, running the numbers for the 100th time. "Jake, honey, come to bed. You're going to burn a hole in that screen." I turned to her, and the moonlight streaming through our bedroom window made her look like an angel. "Sarah, I think I found something. It's a risk, but it could change everything." She sat on the arm of my chair, her hand finding its way to my shoulder like it always did when she could sense my anxiety. "Tell me." I explained the opportunity, watched her face carefully as the numbers sank in. She was quiet for a long time, that kind of quiet that stretches between married people when big decisions are hanging in the air like storm clouds. "That's almost everything we have," she finally whispered. "I know. But Sarah, if this works, and if it doesn't?" I couldn't answer that question because the alternative was too terrifying to speak out loud. We sat there in the darkness, holding each other, while the weight of desperation pressed down on us like a physical thing. The next morning, I made the call that would change our lives forever. The man on the phone sounded professional, confident. His name was David Reynolds, he said, operations manager for Elite Express Logistics. He had that smooth, practiced voice of someone who'd done this conversation 1,000 times before. "Mr. Morrison, you sound like exactly the kind of professional we're looking for. Responsible, experienced, ready to take control of your financial future." "I'm definitely interested, Mr. Reynolds. When can we meet to discuss the details?" "Well, here's the thing, Jake. Can I call you Jake? We're expanding rapidly, and vehicles are flying off our lot. I've got 3 other qualified candidates, and honestly, the first person who can secure their position with the deposit gets the job. It's first come, first served." My palms started sweating. "I see. And how would I?" "Simple wire transfer, Jake. Completely secure, completely professional. You send the deposit today, we overnight you the vehicle assignment paperwork and keys, and you start earning money immediately. Some of our top contractors are pulling in $7,000–8,000 a month." The numbers danced in my head like dollar signs in a cartoon. 8,000 a month would change everything. We could move out of our cramped apartment, maybe start thinking about kids, take that honeymoon to Colorado we'd been dreaming about since our wedding day. "I need to discuss this with my wife," I said. Of course. Family decisions are important. But Jake, I need to be honest with you. I can only hold this opportunity until 5 p.m. today. After that, it goes to the next candidate." The pressure was immediate and intense. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, with success on one side and financial ruin on the other. Sarah and I had the fastest, most intense conversation of our marriage. We sat across from each other at that yellow kitchen table, and I watched her face cycle through hope, fear, determination, and back to hope again. "What does your gut tell you?" she asked. "It tells me we're out of options." "Then we trust each other, and we take the leap together." At 3:47 p.m., I walked into First National Bank and wired $8,000 to Elite Express Logistics. The teller, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, asked twice if I was sure about the transaction. "Wire transfers can't be reversed, sir. Are you certain about this company?" I signed the papers with a hand that barely trembled. "I'm certain." 2 days later, I tried calling David Reynolds. The number was disconnected. The company website had vanished like smoke. Elite Express Logistics had never existed, except in the imagination of very skilled con artists who specialized in preying on desperate people like me. I sat in our living room, holding the bank statement that confirmed our entire life savings had disappeared into the digital ether, and felt something die inside my chest. Sarah took the news with a quietness that was somehow worse than screaming. She just nodded, squeezed my hand, and said, "We'll figure this out." But how do you figure out starting over with less than nothing? The bills didn't care about our tragedy. The rent was due in 2 weeks, and we had $127.34 in our checking account. I applied for emergency loans, but my credit wasn't strong enough without collateral. I called old friends, former coworkers, distant relatives, anyone who might help us bridge the gap until I could find work. Nothing. Everyone was struggling in their own way, fighting their own financial battles in an economy that seemed designed to chew up regular people like us. I started selling our possessions. The television we'd saved 6 months to buy, Sarah's grandmother's jewelry, my fishing equipment that had taken me years to collect. Each item disappeared through Craigslist and pawnshop transactions, converted into temporary relief that lasted days instead of weeks. The morning our landlord, Mr. Peterson, knocked on our door, I knew what was coming before he opened his mouth. He was a decent man, had given us 2 extra weeks already, but business was business. "I'm sorry, Jake. I can't carry you any longer. You've got 72 hours. 72 hours to find a miracle, or find ourselves on the street." That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Sarah stirred beside me. In the darkness, her voice was barely a whisper. "Jake? Yeah, baby? My period is late." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat up so fast the room spun, and in that moment, I understood what people meant when they talked about their blood running cold. "How late?" 2 weeks. I reached for her hand in the darkness, found it already reaching for mine. "Are you?" "I took a test this morning. It's positive." We held each other in the darkness while the full weight of our situation crashed down around us. Homeless in 3 days, broke, and now bringing a baby into this chaos. I should have felt terror, despair, anger at the universe for its cruel timing. Instead, I felt something unexpected. A fierce, protective love that I'd never experienced before. This tiny life growing inside Sarah wasn't another problem to solve. It was the most important reason to solve all our other problems. "We're going to figure this out," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I actually believed it. "I know we are." Her voice was steady, certain. "We're a family now. Families find a way." The next morning, Mr. Peterson returned with the official eviction notice. I tried one last appeal, explained about the pregnancy, the job search, the con job that had stolen our savings. He listened with genuine sympathy, but the math didn't care about our story. "I wish I could help more, Jake. I really do. But I've got my own mortgage to worry about." We had 36 hours to pack our lives into whatever we could carry. My friend Marcus worked the front desk at the downtown Marriott, and I swallowed my pride to call him. We'd known each other since high school, played basketball together, been each other's best man. If anyone would help, it would be Marcus. "Man, Jake, I wish I could. I really do. But Emma and I are sharing a studio apartment, and it's barely big enough for the two of us." The hotel has strict policies about employees having guests. I understood, but understanding didn't solve our problem. We were truly on our own. Moving day arrived with a light September rain that seemed to match our mood perfectly. Sarah packed our remaining belongings into 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, while I tried to figure out where we were going to spend the night. That's when I remembered Tony's parking, a small lot behind the old warehouse district where I used to park when I had job interviews downtown. Tony Marconi was a gruff old guy who'd run the lot for 30 years. He knew every regular customer by name and their car troubles by heart. "Tony, this is going to sound crazy, but I need to ask you something." He looked up from his newspaper, cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth. "Shoot, kid." "My wife and I were going through a tough time. We got evicted today. I was wondering, could we park here at night? Sleep in our car? I can pay you something, not much, but how much you got? $20 a night?" Tony studied my face for a long moment, then looked at Sarah sitting in our borrowed car, her hand resting protectively on her still flat belly. $15, and you keep the place clean. No trash, no noise, no causing problems with my daytime customers." Relief flooded through me so quickly I almost cried. "Tony, thank you. We won't be any trouble, I promise." "Yeah, well, everybody needs a hand sometimes." That first night in Tony's lot was the longest of my life. We'd borrowed Marcus's old Honda, a rust bucket with no heat and seats that felt like concrete blocks. Sarah curled up in the back seat with our extra blankets while I tried to fit my 6-foot frame across the front seats. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional weight of our situation. I was 34 years old, married, about to be a father, and I couldn't provide basic shelter for my family. The shame was suffocating. Around 3 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and walked to the chain-link fence that bordered the lot. The city looked different at that hour, harder, more honest somehow. Neon signs reflected off wet pavement, and the distant sound of traffic reminded me that life was continuing for everyone else while ours had completely stalled. "God," I whispered to the empty sky, "I don't know if you're listening. I don't know if I even deserve your help after ignoring you for so long. But I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for Sarah and for this baby. They don't deserve this." It was the first prayer I'd said since I was 12 years old, standing at my grandfather's funeral. Back then, I'd asked God to bring Grandpa back. When that didn't happen, I figured God either wasn't listening or didn't care. Now, desperate and broken, I found myself talking to that same silent sky. Nothing miraculous happened that night. No angels appeared, no lottery tickets materialized, no job offers fell from heaven. But something small shifted inside me, a tiny spark of something that might have been hope, or might have been stubbornness. Either way, it was enough to get me through until morning. The next day I started walking, not aimlessly, but with purpose. I hit every business district in Chicago, armed with a stack of resumes and a determination born from desperation. Hardware stores, restaurants, retail shops, construction sites, anywhere that might need someone willing to work hard for honest pay. "Sorry, not hiring. We'll keep your resume on file. Try back in a few months." The rejections blurred together into a soundtrack of polite dismissal. By evening, my feet were bleeding in my worn-out shoes, but I'd covered 12 miles and submitted 47 resumes. The routine became our new normal. Sarah would spend her days at the public library, using their internet to research pregnancy information and apply for jobs online. I would pound the pavement, looking for anything that would get us out of that parking lot and into a real home. Every morning, I started with the same destination, St. Catherine's Church on Maple Street. It was a small, humble building wedged between a dry cleaner and a used bookstore, with wooden pews that had been worn smooth by decades of worshippers. I wasn't going to services. I didn't think I belonged there yet. Instead, I would slip in during the quiet morning hours when the church was empty except for the occasional elderly parishioner lighting candles for their own private prayers. I would sit in the back pew and talk to God like he was sitting right next to me. Not formal prayers from memory, but raw, honest conversations about fear and hope and the responsibility of being a husband and soon-to-be father. I don't understand why this happened to us, I would whisper to the stained glass windows that painted rainbow patterns on the worn carpet. Sarah's a good person. She doesn't deserve to be sleeping in a car. This baby deserves better than what I can give. I never heard God's voice audibly respond, but those morning conversations became the anchor that kept me from drowning in despair. There was something about that sacred space that made me feel less alone, less abandoned by the universe. After 3 weeks of sleeping in that parking lot, our situation reached a crisis point that would either break us completely or reveal a strength we didn't know we possessed. The pain started at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, cutting through Sarah's sleep like a knife. I woke to her soft whimpering, her hands pressed against her lower back, her face contorted in a way that made my blood freeze. "Jake, something's wrong," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. I was fully awake instantly, my hand finding her forehead. She was burning up with fever, her skin clammy and pale in the dim streetlight filtering through the car windows. This wasn't normal pregnancy discomfort. This was something serious. "We need to get you to a doctor," I said, already reaching for my shoes. "We can't afford—" "I don't care what we can't afford." I helped her out of the back seat, supporting her weight as we walked the 6 blocks to Chicago General's emergency room. Each step seemed to intensify her pain, and by the time we reached the hospital, she could barely walk. The ER nurse, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, took one look at Sarah and immediately got us into triage. The doctor, Dr. Martinez, examined Sarah with gentle efficiency while I held her hand and tried not to let my panic show. "Mrs. Morrison, you have a severe kidney infection," Dr. Martinez explained. "It's dangerous for you and the baby if we don't treat it immediately. The good news is that with proper antibiotics, you'll both be fine. The bad news is that we need to start treatment right now." Relief and terror warred in my chest. The baby was okay, but Sarah needed medication we couldn't afford. "What kind of antibiotics?" I asked. "I'm prescribing a 10-day course. You can fill it at any pharmacy." She handed me a prescription slip. "Start tonight if possible." At the hospital pharmacy, the pharmacist, a young guy who probably wasn't much older than me, typed the prescription into his computer and delivered the verdict. "That'll be $127.50. I stared at the number on the screen like it was written in a foreign language. We had $23.18 in our checking account and maybe $15 in cash between us. The medication might as well have cost $1 million. Is there a generic version? Something less expensive?" "This is the generic, sir. And with the infection being pregnancy-related, we can't substitute anything else without doctor approval." I looked back at Sarah, who was slumped in a waiting room chair, her face gray with exhaustion and pain. The woman who had stood by me through everything, who had chosen to face homelessness rather than abandon our marriage, needed this medication to protect our unborn child. "Can you hold the prescription? I need to make some calls." The first person I called was Marcus. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Jake, what time is it?" "Marcus, I'm sorry to wake you, but I need help. Sarah's sick, and I need to borrow $130 for antibiotics." There was a long pause. In the background, I could hear his girlfriend Emma asking what was wrong. Man, I wish I could. We're already stretched thin this month. Emma's student loans kicked in, and we're behind on everything. I tried 2 other friends, an old coworker, even my cousin in Milwaukee. Everyone was sympathetic. Everyone was struggling with their own financial battles. The answer was always the same. They wished they could help, but times were tough for everyone. Sitting in that hospital waiting room at 4 a.m., watching my wife suffer while holding a prescription I couldn't afford, I felt like the biggest failure in the world. What kind of man can't take care of his pregnant wife? What kind of husband lets pride stand between his family and the medicine they need? That's when I remembered something my grandfather used to say. When life knocks you down, you can either stay down or find a different way to stand up. I looked at the prescription in my hand. $127.50. Then I looked at the hospital gift shop, which had a small selection of candy and snacks. An idea started forming, crazy and desperate, but maybe crazy enough to work. I approached Marcus one more time, but with a different request. Marcus, I don't need you to give me money. I need you to loan me $50, just for one day. I have an idea, but I need startup capital. Something in my voice must have convinced him, because 30 minutes later, he arrived at the hospital with two 20s and a $10 bill. I don't know what you're planning, Jake, but be careful. Trust me. I kissed Sarah's forehead and promised her I'd be back with her medicine within 6 hours. Then I walked out of that hospital and into the pre-dawn darkness of Chicago, carrying 50 borrowed dollars and the weight of my family's future. The wholesale candy district opened at 6 a.m. I'd discovered it months earlier during my job search, a cluster of warehouses where restaurant and convenience store owners bought supplies in bulk. With my $50, I purchased 10 boxes of assorted candy bars, gum, and mints, 200 pieces total. Then I did something I'd never imagined I'd do. I became a street vendor. I stationed myself at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Jackson, right in the heart of the morning commuter rush. The intersection was a river of people heading to office buildings, all of them moving fast, most of them caffeinated and focused on their phones. The first hour was humbling. I felt exposed, embarrassed, like everyone could see my desperation written across my face. People walked past like I was invisible, or worse, like I was something to be avoided. But then I remembered Sarah's face in that hospital waiting room, and my embarrassment transformed into determination. "Good morning," I called out to a woman in a business suit. "Start your day with something sweet?" She glanced at me, started to walk past, then stopped. "What do you have?" "Chocolate bars, 50 cents each. Gum, 25 cents. Best prices in the loop." She bought a chocolate bar and a pack of gum, 75 cents. My first sale. By 8 a.m., I'd developed a rhythm. I learned to read people's faces, to identify the ones who might stop versus the ones who were too focused to be interrupted. I discovered that genuine friendliness was more effective than aggressive sales tactics. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" I'd say, or "Hope you have a great day at work." Sometimes people bought something, sometimes they just smiled and kept walking. But I was building something, a presence, a personality that people began to recognize. Around 10 a.m., a businessman in an expensive suit approached my corner. He'd walked past twice already, and I could see him studying my setup. "How's business?" he asked. "Getting better," I said honestly. "Learning as I go." "Well, what's your story? You don't look like the typical street vendor." I could have lied, could have made up some story that preserved my dignity. Instead, I told him the truth, about losing my job, the con that stole our savings, sleeping in the parking lot, Sarah's infection, the prescription I couldn't afford. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. "What's your wife's name?" he asked. "Sarah." He bought 10 chocolate bars, $5, and handed me an additional 20. "For Sarah's medicine," he said, and walked away before I could thank him properly. That interaction changed everything. It reminded me that most people are fundamentally good, that kindness exists even in the hardest places, and that honesty, raw, vulnerable honesty, connects people in ways that sales pitches never can. By noon, I'd sold 80% of my inventory and earned $73. Combined with Marcus's loan and the businessman's gift, I had enough for Sarah's antibiotics with money left over to restock for tomorrow. I ran back to that pharmacy like my life depended on it, slapped the money on the counter, and watched the pharmacist count out the pills that would make my wife well. When I got back to the hospital, Sarah was asleep in the waiting room chair. I gently shook her awake and held up the prescription bottle. "Your medicine. Beautiful." She looked at the bottle, then at me, then back at the bottle. "How did you—" I became a businessman. I told her about the morning, about standing on that street corner, about the people who stopped and the ones who didn't, about the businessman who reminded me that vulnerability can be a strength. Sarah took her first antibiotic and leaned against my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "For selling candy? For doing whatever it took." That afternoon, I returned to my corner with a restocked inventory and a new understanding of what I was really selling. It wasn't just candy, it was hope, connection, the simple human interaction that people craved in a city that could feel isolatingly large. I developed regular customers within days. There was Jennifer, a lawyer who bought a chocolate bar every morning and always asked about Sarah. Robert, a construction foreman who bought gum for his whole crew. Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who bought mints and told me stories about her grandchildren in California. These weren't just transactions. They were relationships. When Jennifer had a bad day, I could see it in her face and would slip an extra piece of candy into her bag. When Robert's crew was behind schedule, I'd have their favorite gum ready before they even asked. Most importantly, I discovered something about myself I'd never known. I was good at sales. Not because I was pushy or manipulative, but because I genuinely cared about people and could make them feel seen and valued in the 30 seconds we shared each morning. Within 2 weeks, I was earning $150, $200 per day. We moved out of Tony's parking lot and into a small studio apartment in Pilsen. Nothing fancy, but it had 4 walls, a roof, and a bathroom that belonged to us. Every morning started the same way. I would wake at 5 a.m., walk to St. Catherine's Church for my private conversation with God, then head to the wholesale district to restock my inventory. By 7 a.m., I was on my corner, ready for the morning rush. Those conversations with God became the foundation of everything. I would thank Him for our health, for Sarah's successful recovery, for the customers who became friends, for the money that allowed us to rebuild our lives one day at a time. I know I ignored you for most of my life, I would say to the empty church. I know I only came to you when I was desperate, but I'm learning that you were there all along, waiting for me to pay attention. I started carrying that sense of gratitude into my work. When customers seemed stressed or upset, I would silently pray for them without them knowing. When someone couldn't afford the candy they wanted, I'd give it to them anyway and tell them to sweeten up their day. Sarah's pregnancy progressed beautifully. At her 20-week ultrasound, we learned we were having a boy. We decided to name him Matthew, gift of God, because he truly felt like a blessing that had emerged from our darkest hour. My business grew beyond that single corner. I identified other high-traffic locations, began carrying different products for different demographics, studied my customers' patterns and preferences like a retail scientist. But success brought unexpected challenges. Other vendors began to resent my presence, complaining that I was taking their customers. Some reported me to the city, questioning whether I had proper permits. Others tried to undercut my prices or spread rumors about the quality of my products. Instead of fighting back with anger, I remembered the lessons I was learning in those morning prayers. I treated my competitors with kindness, shared information about good locations, even helped one vendor's elderly father when he had a medical emergency during his shift. Kindness, I discovered, was not weakness. It was the most powerful business strategy I'd ever encountered. After 6 months on the streets, Sarah and I had saved enough money to put a deposit on a real apartment, a 1-bedroom place in a safe neighborhood with a nursery area for Matthew. We bought a used car, nothing fancy, but reliable transportation that meant I could expand my territory. Most importantly, we had hope again. Not just hope for survival, but hope for a future that could be better than anything we'd previously imagined. That's when I started thinking bigger. I was good at sales, really good. My candy business had proven that. But candy sales, no matter how successful, had natural limitations. If I wanted to provide the kind of life I dreamed of for my family, I needed to think beyond the street corner. Real estate had always intrigued me. During my job search months, I'd noticed how well some realtors lived, driving nice cars, wearing expensive suits, talking about deals that netted them more in 1 month than I'd made in a year at the auto rental company. The problem was experience. Every real estate office I'd approached had wanted someone with a track record, existing clients, proven sales history. But I had something they didn't expect, a deep understanding of what it meant to need a home desperately, and the ability to connect with people facing their own financial struggles. I started researching real estate licensing requirements, studied market trends during my slower afternoon hours, and observed successful agents to understand their techniques. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that this was my next step. But first, I needed someone to give me a chance. Premium Properties was the 5th real estate office I approached, and by then I'd refined my pitch. Instead of hiding my unconventional background, I led with it. "Mr. Rodriguez," I said to the owner, "I know I don't have traditional real estate experience, but I've spent the last 8 months learning how to sell to people, how to build relationships, how to understand what customers really need. I've built a business from nothing, and I can do the same thing for your company. David Rodriguez was a sharp man in his 50s who'd built premium properties from a single office into a citywide network. He leaned back in his leather chair and studied me with calculating eyes. What makes you think you can sell houses when you've been selling candy bars? Because people buy from people they trust, and trust comes from authenticity, from genuinely caring about their needs. I've learned how to connect with strangers, how to read what they really want, how to follow through on promises. Those skills transfer. Even if that's true, real estate is competitive. Established agents have client lists, referral networks, marketing budgets. You'd be starting from zero. This was the moment I'd prepared for, the make-or-break pitch that would either open a door or close it forever. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm not asking you to pay me a salary. Give me 1 month. If I don't sell at least one property in 30 days, you can let me go with no hard feelings. If I do sell something, then we'll talk about a permanent position. He raised an eyebrow. You'd work an entire month without guaranteed income? I've been working without guaranteed income for 8 months. At least this way, I'm building towards something bigger. Something in my voice, the quiet confidence that comes from having nothing left to lose, seemed to convince him. All right, Morrison, you've got 30 days, but I'm not providing leads and I'm not holding your hand. You sink or swim on your own effort. I walked out of that office with a real estate license application, a stack of property listings, and exactly 30 days to prove that a former security guard turned street vendor could sell houses in one of Chicago's most competitive markets. The next morning, my prayer in St. Catherine's was different. Instead of asking for survival, I was asking for wisdom, for the ability to serve people in a way that would transform their lives the same way my life had been transformed. God, I whispered to the stained glass windows, I don't know if I'm smart enough or experienced enough for this, but I know you've brought me this far for a reason. Help me use these gifts you've given me to bless other families the way you've blessed mine. What happened next would test everything I'd learned about faith, persistence, and the power of genuine human connection. The phone rang at 6:47 a.m. on my first day as a real estate agent, jarring me awake in our small apartment. Sarah stirred beside me, her hand instinctively moving to her growing belly. Matthew was due in 3 months, and every day brought new reminders of how much was riding on my success. Morrison, I answered, trying to sound professional despite the sleep in my voice. Jake, it's Rodriguez. I know it's early, but I've got a situation. Mrs. Patterson, one of our longtime clients, her agent just quit to join another firm. She's supposed to close on a house next week, but now she's panicking about the whole process. Think you can handle a hand-holding situation? My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't the gradual introduction I'd hoped for. This was being thrown into the deep end with a client who was already stressed and skeptical. Absolutely. What's the address? Mrs. Patterson lived in a modest bungalow in Andersonville, a neighborhood I knew well from my candy-selling roots. She answered the door before I could knock. A woman in her 70s with silver hair and eyes that held equal parts determination and fear. You're the new agent? You look awfully young. Yes, ma'am. I'm Jake Morrison. Mr. Rodriguez asked me to help with your closing. She invited me in, and I could immediately sense the chaos. Real estate documents were scattered across her dining room table, sticky notes marking various pages, and a legal pad filled with questions written in careful handwriting. I don't understand half of these papers, she said, gesturing helplessly at the pile. Tom, my old agent, he always explained everything. Now I'm supposed to sign my life away next Tuesday, and I don't even know what I'm agreeing to. I sat down across from her, moved the papers aside, and looked directly into her eyes. Mrs. Patterson, before we look at any documents, tell me about the house you're buying. What made you fall in love with it? Her entire demeanor changed. The anxiety melted away as she described a small cottage near her daughter's family, with a garden perfect for her tomatoes and a front porch where she could watch her grandchildren play. I've been dreaming about that garden for months, she said, but now I'm terrified I'm making a mistake. For the next 2 hours, I walked through every document with her, explaining each clause in plain English, helping her understand not just what she was signing, but why each piece was important. When she had questions, I researched the answers on the spot. When she seemed overwhelmed, I slowed down and reminded her of that garden she was working toward. By the time I left, Mrs. Patterson was smiling. You know, Jake, you remind me of my grandson. He has that same way of making complicated things seem simple. The closing went perfectly. Mrs. Patterson signed her papers with confidence, got the keys to her dream cottage, and gave me a hug that felt like a blessing. "Thank you for treating me like family instead of just another commission," she said. That first success taught me something crucial. Real estate wasn't about selling houses. It was about understanding people's dreams and fears, then helping them navigate the complicated path between the two. But one successful closing didn't make me a real estate agent. I still had 28 days to prove myself, and I was starting from absolute zero. That afternoon, I did something that probably seemed crazy to the other agents. I went back to my old street corner. Not to sell candy, but to talk to my former customers about their housing situations. Jennifer, the lawyer, mentioned she'd been thinking about buying a condo. Robert, the construction foreman, said his crew was always looking for affordable rental properties. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter was moving to Chicago and needed an apartment. Within a week, I had 3 legitimate leads, people who knew me, trusted me, and were willing to let me help them with the biggest financial decision of their lives. My approach was different from the other agents at Premium Properties. While they focused on online marketing and cold calling, I built my business through relationships. I remembered that every client was someone's Mrs. Patterson, navigating a complex process while carrying hopes and fears that went far beyond the transaction itself. Jennifer's condo search took 3 weeks. We looked at 17 properties before finding the perfect one-bedroom with lake views and a parking space that fit her budget. The day she got her keys, she cried in the lobby. "I've been living in apartments for 10 years, she said. "This is the first place that's actually mine." Robert's rental search was more challenging. His crew members needed affordable housing near construction sites that changed every few months. I started building relationships with landlords who specialized in short-term industrial rentals, creating a network that would serve blue-collar workers across the city. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, Lisa, was fresh out of college with minimal credit history and a tight budget. Instead of dismissing her as an unprofitable client, I worked with first-time buyer programs and found a small studio in Chinatown that she could afford. Each success felt like a miracle, but more importantly, each success generated referrals. Jennifer recommended me to 3 colleagues. Robert's crew spread the word at construction sites across the city. Lisa's friends started calling about their own housing needs. On day 28 of my trial period, I walked into Rodriguez's office with documentation of 4 completed sales and a pipeline of 8 active clients. "I'll be honest, Morrison," he said, reviewing my numbers. "I expected you to wash out in 2 weeks. How did you build this kind of momentum so quickly?" I treated every client like they were my family. That's not a strategy, that's a philosophy. Sometimes they're the same thing. Rodriguez offered me a permanent position with a base salary plus commission. For the first time in over a year, Sarah and I had financial security and the promise of a future that extended beyond just surviving day to day. But success brought new challenges I hadn't anticipated. The other agents at Premium Properties started noticing my rapid rise. Some were genuinely supportive, offering advice and celebrating my victories. Others seemed resentful that someone with no formal experience was matching their sales numbers within months. The tension came to a head during a staff meeting in December. Tom Brennan, a 20-year veteran with expensive suits and an attitude to match, made a comment that cut deep. "It's interesting how Morrison here gets all these easy referral clients while the rest of us have to fight for scraps in a competitive market." The room went quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond to this public challenge. "Tom, you're right that I get referrals," I said calmly, "but they're not easy clients. They're people who trust me because I've earned that trust. If you want more referrals, maybe focus less on fighting for scraps and more on serving the clients you have." The meeting ended with uncomfortable silence, but my point was made. I wasn't going to apologize for my success or change my approach to fit someone else's idea of how real estate should work. The real test of my character came in February when I was 7 months into my real estate career and Sarah was 8 months pregnant. A woman named Rebecca Torres came to our office looking for help with a foreclosure situation. She was a single mother with 2 young children, facing eviction after her ex-husband had stopped paying child support. She had equity in her home but needed to sell quickly to avoid losing everything. Tom Brennan had initially taken her listing, but when he realized the house needed significant repairs and the timeline was compressed, he dropped her as a client. "It's not worth the headache," he told Rodriguez. "She's emotional, the property has problems, and the commission won't be worth the time investment." Rodriguez asked if I wanted to take over the listing. Every practical instinct told me to decline. Rebecca's situation was complicated, the house needed work, and she was clearly struggling emotionally with the failure of her marriage and the possibility of displacement. But when I met with Rebecca at her house, a small two-bedroom with a leaky roof and outdated kitchen, I saw something familiar in her eyes. The same fear I'd felt sleeping in Tony's parking lot. The same desperation I'd experienced holding a prescription I couldn't afford. "Mrs. Torres, tell me what you need." She broke down completely. Through tears, she explained that she just wanted enough money from the sale to rent a small apartment in a good school district for her kids. She didn't care about maximizing profit, she cared about stability and giving her children a chance at a normal life. I spent the next 2 weeks coordinating with contractors to get estimates for necessary repairs, researching comparable sales to establish realistic pricing, and most importantly, walking Rebecca through every step of the process so she understood her options. The house sold in 3 weeks for enough money to pay off her mortgage, cover her debts, and leave her with a down payment for a rental deposit. The day of closing, Rebecca hugged me and whispered, "You saved my family." That case established my reputation in a way that no marketing campaign could have achieved. Word spread through Chicago's Latino community about the agent who had helped the single mother avoid foreclosure. My phone started ringing with referrals from people facing their own housing crises. I realized I was building more than a business. I was building a ministry. Every morning still started with my private conversation with God at St. Catherine's. But now, instead of praying for survival, I was praying for wisdom to serve people facing their most vulnerable moments. God, give me the patience to understand what each client really needs. Help me see beyond the commission to the human being who's trusting me with their dreams. Those prayers changed how I approached every interaction. When clients seemed difficult or demanding, I remembered that they were probably scared. When deals became complicated, I focused on creative solutions rather than easy exits. When other agents criticized my methods, I stayed committed to treating every person like family. Sarah went into labor on a Tuesday morning in March, just as I was reviewing contracts for 3 different closings scheduled that week. I called Rodriguez from the hospital waiting room, expecting to reschedule everything. "Take care of your family, Morrison. We'll handle the paperwork." Matthew James Morrison entered the world at 3:47 p.m., weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces. When I held him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, I understood something profound about responsibility and purpose. This little boy would never know what it felt like to sleep in a parking lot or worry about affording medicine. Not because life would be easy, but because his father had learned how to find strength in the darkest places and how to serve others even while struggling himself. During Sarah's recovery, I worked from the hospital, taking calls in the corridor and reviewing documents between feeding times. My clients understood because I'd built relationships based on genuine care rather than just professional obligation. 6 months after Matthew's birth, Rodriguez called me into his office with an unexpected proposition. "Jake, I've been watching your numbers, and more importantly, I've been watching your client satisfaction scores. You're not just selling houses, you're changing people's lives. I want to offer you something." He explained that Premium Properties was expanding into the suburbs, opening a new office in Aurora to serve the growing population of young families seeking affordable housing outside the city. "I want you to manage the new location. You'd still sell, but you'd also train new agents and help establish our culture in that market." The offer was tempting. More money, more responsibility, a chance to shape how an entire office approached real estate. But I'd learned to test every major decision against my faith and my family's needs. That night, I prayed harder than I had since those desperate mornings when we were homeless. "God, this seems like a great opportunity, but I need to know if it's your plan for us or just my ambition. Show me what you want." For 3 days, I wrestled with the decision. Sarah supported whatever choice I made, but I could see she was excited about the possibility of a suburban home with a yard where Matthew could play. On the 3rd night, as I sat in St. Catherine's Church in the pre-dawn quiet, I opened the Bible to a random page, something I'd started doing when I needed guidance. My finger landed on Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." The words hit me like a physical force. This wasn't just about career advancement. This was about the future God had been preparing since that night when I first whispered desperate prayers in a parking lot. I accepted Rodriguez's offer, but with conditions that reflected what I'd learned about real estate and about life. I'll take the position, but I want to hire agents based on character, not just experience. I want to train them to serve clients, not just sell to them. And I want every agent to understand that we're not just in the real estate business. We're in the business of helping people build better lives. The Aurora office opened in September, and I hired 5 agents using criteria that would have seemed unconventional to most real estate brokers. Instead of focusing solely on sales experience, I looked for people with service backgrounds, former teachers, social workers, military veterans, people who understood that success comes from putting others first. One of my first hires was Maria Santos, a former social worker who had helped families navigate housing assistance programs. Another was David Kim, a military veteran who understood the importance of attention to detail and following through on commitments. During training, I shared my own story, the job loss, the con that stole our savings, the nights in the parking lot, and the morning prayers that sustained me through it all. I wanted every agent to understand that behind every real estate transaction was a human story that deserved respect and care. We're not selling houses, I told them during our first team meeting. We're helping people achieve their dreams of home ownership, stability, and hope. Never forget that the commission check is just a byproduct of serving someone well. The Aurora office exceeded all projected sales targets within 6 months. But more importantly, our client satisfaction scores were the highest in the company's history. We were building something special, a real estate practice that put people before profits. As our first year in Aurora ended, I received a call that would test everything I'd learned about integrity and loyalty. Mr. Morrison? This is Jennifer Walsh from Midwest Realty Group. We've been watching your success in Aurora, and we'd like to make you an offer. Midwest Realty was Premium Properties' biggest competitor, with offices throughout the Chicago area and a reputation for aggressive recruiting. We're prepared to offer you a signing bonus of $50,000 plus higher commission splits, plus equity in our Aurora franchise. You could bring your whole team and essentially own your own territory. The offer was financially attractive, more money than I'd ever imagined making. It would mean a bigger house, better schools for Matthew, financial security that extended beyond just comfortable living. But it would also mean abandoning Rodriguez, who had given me a chance when no one else would. It would mean breaking commitments to my team and clients who had trusted me to build something lasting in Aurora. That night, I knelt beside Matthew's crib and watched him sleep. His tiny chest rose and fell with perfect rhythm, completely trusting that the world would take care of him. In that moment, I understood that integrity wasn't just about keeping promises to other people. It was about teaching my son through my actions what kind of man I wanted him to become. The next morning, I called Jennifer Walsh. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested. I'm committed to Premium Properties and to the team we're building here. Mr. Morrison, I don't think you understand the financial opportunity you're passing up. Actually, I understand it perfectly. That's why I'm saying no. When I told Rodriguez about the offer and my decision to decline it, he was quiet for a long moment. Jake, you know I would have understood if you'd taken it. That's a life-changing amount of money. Mr. Rodriguez, my life was already changed. Not by money, but by people who believed in me when I had nothing to offer except determination. I'm not going to abandon that for a bigger paycheck. A week later, Rodriguez called me into his office with another proposal. Jake, the board of directors has been reviewing our expansion plans. Based on the success in Aurora, they want to offer you a partnership in the company. You'd have equity, profit sharing, and input on all major decisions. This time, I didn't need 3 days of prayer to know the answer. God had been preparing me for this moment since that first desperate night when I'd whispered prayers to an empty sky. I accept, but I have one condition. What's that? I want to establish a foundation, a program that helps families facing foreclosure or housing crises. Sometimes people need more than just a good real estate agent. Sometimes they need someone to fight for them, to connect them with resources, to help them navigate systems that seem designed to work against them. Rodriguez smiled. Like a family that's lost everything and needs someone to believe they can rebuild? Exactly like that. Today, as I write this story, Matthew is 3 years old and running around our backyard in Aurora, the same yard where Sarah grows tomatoes that remind us of Mrs. Patterson's dreams. Sarah is pregnant with our second child, a daughter we'll name Grace, because Grace has been the theme of our entire journey. The Morrison Family Foundation has helped over 200 families avoid foreclosure or find emergency housing. We partner with churches, social service agencies, and legal aid organizations to provide comprehensive support for people facing housing crises. Every morning still starts with prayer at St. Catherine's, though now I sometimes bring Matthew with me, teaching him to talk to God like a friend who's always listening. Every day still involves selling real estate, but it's become something much more than a job. I think about the night when I stood at that chain-link fence, looking at the city lights, and asking God why our lives had fallen apart. I couldn't see then that God wasn't punishing us. He was preparing us. Every hardship was teaching us empathy. Every struggle was building strength we'd need to serve others. Every prayer was deepening a relationship that would sustain us through whatever challenges lay ahead. The truth is, I needed to lose everything to find what really mattered. I needed to sleep in a parking lot to understand what home really means. I needed to sell candy on street corners to learn how to connect with people's hearts. I needed to face impossible odds to discover that faith isn't just believing in God. It's trusting that God believes in you, even when you can't see the path forward. If you're listening to this story and facing your own impossible situation, if you're sleeping in your car or holding bills you can't pay or wondering if God has forgotten about you, let me tell you something. He hasn't forgotten. The emptiness you feel, the fear that keeps you awake at night, the sense that nothing will ever be okay again, all of that is real, but it's not permanent. God is writing a story with your life that's bigger than your current chapter. The pain you're experiencing isn't meaningless. It's preparation for a purpose you can't yet see. The prayers you whisper in dark moments aren't falling on deaf ears. They're being heard by a God who specializes in turning impossible situations into testimony. Right now, wherever you are, whatever you're facing, I want you to close your eyes and talk to God like He's sitting right next to you. Don't worry about formal prayers or perfect words. Just tell Him what's in your heart. Tell Him about your fears, your hopes, your dreams for your family. Ask Him to help you find strength for today and hope for tomorrow. Then, when you open your eyes, look for the next right step. It might not be a dramatic miracle. It might just be a phone call, a conversation, a small act of kindness that opens an unexpected door. God works through ordinary moments and everyday people more often than through burning bushes and parted seas. But most importantly, remember that your current situation is not your final destination. The God who provided manna in the wilderness, who turned water into wine, who raised the dead, that same God is working in your life right now, even when you can't see it. Your breakthrough might be closer than you think. Your miracle might come through a stranger's kindness, an unexpected opportunity, or simply the strength to take one more step forward when everything inside you wants to quit. Don't give up. Don't lose faith. Don't let temporary circumstances convince you that God has abandoned you. Instead, pray this prayer with me. God, I don't understand why I'm going through this struggle, but I choose to trust that you have a plan for my life. Give me strength for today, hope for tomorrow, and the faith to believe that my current situation is not my final destination. Help me to serve others even while I'm struggling, to maintain my integrity even when it's costly, and to never forget that every blessing comes from you. Use my pain to prepare me for purpose, and let my story become a testimony of your faithfulness. In Jesus' name, amen. Your story isn't over. In fact, it might just be beginning.